Marcus Reyes did everything the American dream asked of him. 2 tours. 12 years without missing a shift at the warehouse. A decade of saving every spare dollar he could find. None of that was the reason he almost lost the house. The actual reason had already happened, years earlier, in a moment so small Marcus never once thought to file it under risk. He wouldn't find out what it was until the day his signature was already on the offer, and even then, the first thing he'd learn wouldn't be the whole story. There's a photo Marcus kept in his wallet through both deployments, Danielle on the porch of their first apartment, pregnant with Sophia, squinting into the sun. He used to take it out some nights overseas just to remember what the whole thing was actually for. Marcus and Danielle had a jar on top of the fridge for 6 years before they ever upgraded to a real savings account, quarters and fives at first, then whatever was left after rent, groceries, and their daughter Sophia's shoes, which never seemed to stay the right size for more than 4 months. Marcus used to tell Sophia, tucking her in some nights, that someday she'd have a yard big enough for the dog she kept asking for. He believed it the way you believe something you've said enough times out loud to make it feel already true. He believed something else, too, without ever quite saying it, that if you saved enough, and paid every bill you knew about, on time, every time, the system would eventually just say yes. It doesn't always work that way. Marcus wouldn't learn why until years later, standing in an office with his daughter 30 feet away in the car, already decorating a room in her head. 15 years after that jar first went up on the fridge, Marcus and Danielle finally found the house. Small yard, big enough for a dog. Blue shutters Danielle had wanted since before they were even engaged. Sophia picked out her room before they'd even made an offer, already deciding which wall the bed would go against. They told Marcus's parents that weekend, his mother crying into a dish towel before he'd finished the sentence. Told Danielle's sister that same night. Told Sophia she could pick paint colors, and watched her spend 45 minutes deciding between 2 shades of yellow that looked, to Marcus, identical. The loan officer's name was Kevin, and he pulled Marcus's credit with the same easy confidence he'd probably used 1,000 times before. Marcus was a veteran, after all, and everybody knows the VA takes care of its own. Here's what almost nobody in that office actually understood, including Marcus. The VA doesn't set a credit score requirement at all. It never has. The VA guarantees part of the loan against default, that's the entire benefit. It's the lender, not the government, who decides what score they'll actually accept, and most lenders quietly draw that line somewhere around 620, a number nobody at a recruiting station ever mentions. Kevin's screen took a second longer to load than it should have. For a half second, Marcus's mind went to strange places. Identity theft, maybe, he'd heard stories from guys in his unit about that. Or some paperwork mix-up from his second duty station, an address that never got updated, a records error that had been trailing him for a decade without his knowledge. Anything that wasn't his fault, because as far as he knew, nothing in 15 years actually was. "There's an account here I need to ask you about," Kevin said. "A car loan. Charged off in 2013. Marcus didn't recognize it at first. Then he did, all at once, the way you remember a name you haven't said out loud in years the moment somebody else says it first. "That's my brother's," he said. "I co-signed it. Before a deployment." That wasn't the part that scared him most. The part that scared him most came next. "Co-signing isn't a favor with a ceiling on it," Kevin said, not unkindly. "Legally, you didn't guarantee half a loan. You became just as responsible for the whole thing as your brother was, the moment you signed, same as if you'd bought the car yourself and handed him the keys. Most people don't find that out until exactly this moment. And once an account like that goes to collections, it doesn't just disappear when things get better. It stays reportable for 7 years from the date it went delinquent, ticking down on its own schedule, not yours. That wasn't the part that scared Marcus most, either. The part that scared him most was realizing he had no idea how many other years were still sitting on that clock. Danny had lost the job for months after Marcus left for deployment. The payment stopped not long after that. Nobody had called Marcus, because nobody had a way to reach him, and by the time he was back stateside, it had already gone to collections, the kind of damage that doesn't announce itself with a phone call. The kind that just sits there, quietly, for over a decade, waiting for the one day it actually matters. "I've never once missed a payment on anything I actually knew I owed," Marcus said. That sentence was true. It didn't change a single number on the screen. Danielle finally asked the question neither of them wanted to say out loud. "What does this mean for the house?" It meant a rate high enough to add nearly $200 to the monthly payment if they even still qualified. Kevin mentioned another lender down the street who might take a softer look. VA-backed loans get denied at roughly half the rate FHA loans do, a program built to say yes more often than most. Marcus called that same afternoon, sitting in the parking lot with the phone on speaker so Danielle could hear it too. They said no within 20 minutes. Same account. Same answer, just delivered faster the second time, like the whole system had already made up its mind before Marcus finished explaining himself. Then Kevin's phone buzzed with an email from the listing agent, and his face changed a second time. The sellers had a second offer that morning, full price, no contingencies. For days to close the gap, or step aside. Danielle didn't say it angrily. She said it quietly, in the car, which was worse. "Maybe we just wait a year. Rent a little longer. I don't want Sophia hearing us fight about a house we don't even have yet." Marcus didn't have an answer for her yet. For the first time in 15 years of saving, he genuinely wasn't sure there was one. Danny called that night, voice already cracking before Marcus said hello. "I didn't know it went to collections," he said. "I swear to you, I didn't know it hit your report and not mine." It hadn't hit Danny's the same way. Co-signers carry the account and the damage equally, whether or not they're the one who stopped paying it, which is exactly why Kevin's earlier warning matters more than it sounds like it should. Marcus had spent a decade with a spotless payment history on paper and one buried account quietly working against every bit of it, and neither brother had ever once thought to check. "I'm not mad at you," Marcus said. "I'm mad nobody ever told either of us this was how it worked." A credit counselor named Renee, recommended by a coworker who'd been through something similar, sat them down 2 days later. First thing she did was pull all 3 of Marcus's reports side by side, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, because they don't always match, and most lenders only pull 1 or 2 unless a borrower specifically asks. "This is the check almost nobody runs 6 months before they need it," she said. By the time you're sitting in a loan office with a deadline, there's no real time left to fix anything quietly. Most people find out what's on their report the same week they need it to already be clean. Marcus thought that was the worst of it. It wasn't quite. She found 2 smaller errors that had nothing to do with Danny, an old address mismatch, an account marked open that had actually closed years earlier. The kind of clerical mistake that shows up on roughly a third of American credit reports and sits there uncorrected because almost nobody ever looks closely enough to catch it. "You did everything you were supposed to do," Renee told him. "Nobody ever told you there was a second test running underneath the one you were actually taking." Then she smiled, just slightly, and reached for her phone. Those 2 errors, though, there's a process called a rapid rescore. Lenders can push a correction through in 3 to 5 business days instead of the standard 30 if the paperwork moves today. Friday's tight. It isn't impossible. Fixing the errors alone moved Marcus's score enough to matter. Not enough to erase the higher rate. Enough to bring the payment within reach if they could close the remaining gap in time. Danny showed up at Marcus's door that Wednesday night with the title to his truck, the one he'd finally paid off 2 years earlier, and a check already written for most of what it was worth. He hadn't called first. He'd just driven straight over the second he heard the deadline from their mother. "You signed something for me at an airport once without asking a single question," he said, before Marcus could speak. "I'm not asking you any either. Take it. I'll ride the bus a while." Marcus tried twice to refuse it. Danny left it on the counter and walked out before he could try a third time, the same quick handshake and go he'd given Marcus in that parking lot 15 years earlier, like neither of them had ever learned how to make a goodbye last longer than it needed to. They closed Friday afternoon, for hours before the deadline. Sophia got the room she'd already picked, the wall she'd already decided on. The yellow went up 2 weeks later, same shade she'd argued for the first time. Danny came by that first weekend and stood in the new yard while the sheltered dog he'd picked out ran figure eights around Sophia's ankles. Marcus still carries the photo from his wallet. He took it out again the evening they closed, standing on the new porch at almost the same hour of day, the same slant of light as the one behind Danielle in the picture. For 15 years he'd believed that discipline alone was the whole test: save enough, pay everything you know about, and the rest takes care of itself. He understood it differently now, holding one porch in his hand while standing on the other. Showing up for your family was never just the saving. It was checking, long before anyone asks you to, that nothing you can't see is quietly standing in the way of it, because a signature from 15 years ago doesn't stop counting just because you stopped thinking about it.